We are on the Seattle waterfront. That old 1900 era pier is now the Seattle Aquarium, and right across the street. This has been here since 1978. The Seattle Antiques Market is the first place I bought an antique on my own at the age of 17, a lovely little Art Deco English dresser. Seattle Antiques Market is at the base of the hill below the Pike Place Market, so this is a big tourist area. Our friend Ken has been the owner of this place for a long, long time. He used to come and shop our estate sales, but he's got some stock. So these days, I think it's all here. And right away, we see this interesting, funky, cool thing that was made of flotsam and jetsam. Great old binnacle here. You're going to see a lot of maritime antique. Here's a cool tapestry I haven't seen before with Lindbergh in front of the Spirit of St. Louis. That one's priced at $120. That's either French or Belgian from around 1927 when he made the historic flight. And that's an unusual piece. Cold cotton quays, Boy Scout memorabilia, fishing areas. And then some things that are a little more sophisticated for serious collectors, like this nice inkwell set, this desk stand there. Some nautical antiques. The quart hole for $250 is about the right price with the cover. Here's a Thompson print of Lake Louise, which is up in Alberta, a place that people oftentimes launch from here and go see when they drive up to Canada. The hanging spice rack with the printing on it and the porcelain knobs for only $35 is a good deal. That would certainly sell for more in parts of the country where I sell. Motion lamps. This is just a fun store with a lot of cool stuff. We've got a case of Hummels here. We have an entire case of Coors Rosebud pottery from the 1930s. Yes, the same company that made Coors beer. This is what they did to get by in the Depression. I'll look at the old Rowitzer bubble jukebox with the bubbles actually working. 1940s, the Model 1015. This is a classic and in great working order. And yes, it's priced high, but these are really hard to find in that condition these days. An old console here as well, a Wurlitzer. Back in the 70s, this was not an expensive place to have real estate, and fortunately they bought this, and this is why this place still exists when everything around it has built up over the years. Look how fun that wall is. This place is cool because it's got all the kind of things that people are collecting now, as well as a lot of things that are vintage and antique from the past. Lots of vinyl. Viewmaster reels, all of these fun games that we grew up with. This is definitely a fun place for this kind of thing. Duke Kahanamoku was the Hawaiian who really introduced surfing to the rest of us. And I have a great shirt with his label on it. This is a good little ukulele, and if it had the string board so that you could restring it, $10 would be a bargain. However, I don't know where to get that piece, or else I'd buy this and fix it. The Seattle Sounders have a playoff game tomorrow that I'm going to, and I believe that you are allowed to bring bongo drums. And Beverly's old bongo drums are only $10, so I think I might have to get those. Well, this is another thing that we see people collecting. When this place opened, these were just starting to be made, and now, well, you know, it's been 45 years. Kentucky Fried Movie, that was certainly a strange thing from 1977, directed by John Landis, rather tongue-in-cheek. Just as a cool display, the Parade of Toys and Dolls from Bailey Drugs. And then we got some fun glass in here. This big purple piece for only $25 with all the poles. And the handkerchief one seems like a good price. This one is silver overlay, but this is electroplated overlay, so it's not a big chunk of silver, it's just on the surface. $45 is a good price for them, though. They get a ton of tourists through here, and a lot of people bring families and kids, and that's all really great. But they have to have signs like don't press the keys and what to touch and what not to touch, because they can't assume that this is just a sophisticated antique audience coming in here that knows how to handle these things. What a variety of typewriters. Royals and Smith Coronas, the old Remington, the Coronet here in a lovely powder blue. All sorts from the 1920s on through to about the 1960s or 70s. Some of these little portables in color are actually the more collectible these days. Old Washington license plates. This is from the Gold Jubilee of 1939. That was the 50th anniversary of statehood. We had a special license plate in 1989 as well. The purple gumball machine is a harder one to find. That's an old Lions promotion there. You put in a dime and some of it would go to help. Nice selection of old oak phones here as well. Pez dispensers, I mean, they hit all of the things that people collect now and a lot of people understand to be collectible. Nice collection of cameras as well. We've got old rangefinders here. This is an interesting meter with the cover that flips. A nice Yashica from the 1960s, prices in the $30 and $35 range. The great thing about this place is that it is not priced for tourists. These are realistic collector prices on these items. And so it is a place that people can really shop. We still see these at estate sales. These are old travel cases, 1920s and 30s and 40s. And this would have everything that someone needed to take with them. A toothbrush folder, some vials for liquids and shampoos, a mirror, brushes, all the good stuff. Priced at $45, that's a pretty typical price for those. This is neat because it's an old beaver stovepipe hat with the case from the late 1800s. And they've got a bunch of other hats in here too. I like this one with the big rhinestone adornment on it. P&O, this was an Australian cruise line. For our Australian viewers, you might recognize P&O things. I had a wonderful boomerang that was P&O that I sold on eBay a few years ago. This is Joseph Originals. I haven't seen this piece before. The elephant looking up at the mouse. For some reason, elephants are afraid of mice. I'm not sure where that lore came from. But he looks like he's sweating it. Variety here. This is the January. One of the flower of the months from Royal Albert. There are people who collect the whole series of those, and that's their service for fancy times. Coal Clow. Coal Clow actually made the pattern that Hyacinth Bucket on Keeping Up Appearances claims to be royal golden with the periwinkles, but it's actually a Coal Clow pattern. This looks like a nice little Japanese piece here. To me, the more flowers, the better on these. And color is good too. This one is a nice foley, and foley is a better name. Look how translucent that is when you hold it up to light. Furniture. We see some modernist furniture. These Shaw Walker pieces are from 1978, so these were new when this place opened. My, how time flies. The Ames rocker is a famous design, of course. Charles and his wife, Ray Ames, had their studio in California and ended up working for Knoll and did some amazing stuff. But he also has true antiques. I really like this leaded glass with the triple curved. The more curved and serpentine the glass, the more expensive these were new. You can replace that glass, but it does cost money, so try not to break it. Very nice from about 1900. Ah yes, Mount St. Helens, there it went. May of 1980, that changed the Northwest in some major ways, particularly Centralia, where I sell. It wiped out all of the local industry. Unemployment soared, and the downtown went vacant. And now that downtown is full of antique stores. So one thing goes and another thing replaces. This phone also would have been new about the time that this opened in 1978 with the faux alligator. $65. Nautical themed lamp. And then we get into furniture. This is a nice little pug table set. They have it priced at $7.50. These are really convenient. They're from England. They used them a lot in the pubs. This has the barley twist legs. I just bought barley twist candles that would look good on that from England from about the same time, about 1920. These leaves are self-storing. So this comes up and then these leaves can push in underneath. So you end up with a very small game table size. And then you can pull out one or both leaves if you need more space. A very practical and easy to use thing. And that's why they're popular. Oh, speaking of which, here's a pair of barley twist candlesticks now. Behind it, we have a circa 1980 tile top table. We're starting to see interest in these tile top tables again, because when you get a lot of teak furniture, you start needing things that have a little bit more design to break it up so you don't just have square boxes. And now that people have filled their houses with a lot of square brown boxes, they're starting to look for pieces like this to break it up a little bit, which is what happened back in the late 70s and early 80s that caused that to be made in the first place. Telephones, especially like the green one in the middle, which I believe is an automatic electric. It says that it works. It's priced at $65, and it's an old rotary dial from the mid-60s. And there's the automatic electric Starlight mark on the bottom, and it was made in 1965. That's that number in the middle. A lot of great things were made in 1965, including yours truly. By the 1980s, the push-button desk phone was a thing. This is an IT&T in that country blue that was popular at the time. It works, and it's $20. $35 for this one from the 70s next to it. Aren't these stately? Love the Trojan. These appear to be spelter, I believe, rather than bronze, but they show some of the brass underneath. That's just a beautiful set from about 1900. I am not sure what the price is on those. I think I will ask. Nice looking barometer from the late 1800s. This one's only $150. I've sold them for almost that price in half that size. It does have a little bit of damage in the veneer that you would have to fix, though. Here's a very handsome American oak set. I like this pierced baluster back on the chairs. $850 for the set. It used to be just the tables cost $850, so American oak furniture is a relative deal right now. Behind is a really lovely etagere/curio cabinet in mahogany from about 1900. Look how graceful that is. It's not very large. It's got that nice central curved area for display. This would be a fun thing to house a collection. Here's a bunch of Wileware. We think of Wileware as primarily having been lady figurines from the 1930s through the 50s, but Weil also made a number of dinnerware patterns. I love square dishes, as you know, very popular in the 1940s and early 50s, and there is the mark that the donkey on the back. These prices are really very good, $8 each for the dinner plates. Only $20 for this Detecto postal scale. It's got all of its weights. That seems really quite reasonable for what it is. And then he has a very nice oak sideboard over there as well. So it's an interesting combination of things. Way up high there, we have the Corvette. The Schwinn Corvette was a bigger model, a nice 1959 era bicycle. This one has the speedometer and the light and all the goodies, even the front basket holder. It looks like it's in really good shape, and it's priced at $750. Bunch of Pyrex in here because, you know, Pyrex is popular everywhere with good reason. I personally am interested in these striped design. There's something really appealing to me about that. Here's a piano stool that's a little bit more interesting than your average because it has a back. Lots of piano stools are just this base part, but with the back, you're definitely more desirable, and they have a price of $175 on that, which is typical for those from about 1900. These are really cool. These are old steamship menus. Savage was the artist on this. There's another series by Kelly that were for another steamship line. This one is fanciful because they make it seem as if the Hawaiians are thrilled to see the English taking over the Hawaiian Islands. They were less than thrilled. Captain Cook was murdered there, so you can ask him about that. This was for mats and lines. Aboard the Lurleen, if you sailed to Hawaii in this period of time, well, you would have had this menu and your name would have been on a guest list published inside. This one I think is also quite fanciful, as showing the Hawaiians celebrating the dethroning of their queen and the handover to the Americans who annexed it in 1893. Annexing was a nice way of saying we basically just took it and said it was ours. So Again, fanciful images, but definitely collectible and fun for framing. These are priced at $35 each, which is a pretty difficult price for these. Another really interesting piece. Ken always bought interesting furniture like this from us when we had it at estate sales, and he just has an eye for things that have a little bit of extra design, a little bit of curvature in the glass, this interesting treatment over the window panes. This one is priced at $650. I have a friend looking for stools, and this is about the right height. I wish they had a pair. It's only $45. It's a wrought iron back. It's not Milo Bauman, but it definitely has the look. That's got a nice place for your feet. That's a really good price, honestly. Stacking bookcase with various shaving mugs that we see it here. Shaving mugs because you've got a place. A mustache cup has the place to keep your mustache out of the drink, but a shaving mug has a place to rest your brush. That's the difference. Look at this cool guy, 1950s Pepsi. Merry Christmas. That is a single dot. They had 2 dots between Pepsi and Cola until I believe the mid-50s, and then it went to 1 dot. And then the modern design that replaced the bottle cap design came out in the 1970s. So this is a late 50s era piece, priced at $75. It's about what I got for the last one I sold. Oh, and something for Dad. This is 1940s or 50s factory screen print art, but the dancers and all that motion were very popular in that time. You can tell screen painting and airbrushing by the fact that the pictures are very almost paint by number-y in terms of their precision. So the signature is a bit fictitious. Well, we're going to go past the marina sign, but we're not really going into a marina. We're going into the back room. And the back room has, again, more of everything. More chests. Look at this really interesting carving on this one. Oak chest from about 1910, I would say, with those big cab feet. The interesting figures. Lots of detail. This looks like a European piece. This looks like a Lane chest from the 1960s. This is an unusually carved Asian chest, probably from Hong Kong, mid-20th century. A lot of these were brought to Washington by people who were stationed in Asia during the occupation of Japan and various wars in Asia. 1950s Zenith TV. Wow, that's really cool. On the swivel stand that it came with originally. Priced at $450. I bet it still works. Various luggage here, including a Hartman piece. Hartman is a good name to look for in luggage from the 1970s. It was higher end at the time. It was well made. There's the logo on that. $50 is actually a pretty reasonable price for a Hartman piece in good shape. 60s era Enjoy Coca-Cola. And then just for fun, because again, a lot of tourists come through here, so they just give you interesting things to thumb through. Pictures from the Vancouver World's Fair in 1986. We just showed that building in a video recently. Old family photos. This is what these old drawers became used for. And now he could probably sell the drawer for a bunch of money, but it's useful, so it stays here. And wow. There is fashion, and on top of that guy's head is a gold hat, and my father worked gold. I like the dress in the middle there, especially. And then there's a whole bunch of like magazines. People will buy these if they are close to somebody's birthday or have an interesting subject on them. But then there's stage magazines, the Saturday Evening Post. Esquire tends to sell for good money because they have interesting articles, interesting designs, sometimes Varga pinups or other pinups, as you see here. Cleopatra, a very famous movie, controversial in that it was really given a lot of attention and acclaim at the time. In retrospect, there's a little more of a question as to whether it was a great movie or just a famous movie that Elizabeth Taylor certainly looked glamorous in it. Prince Charles has had a little bit of trouble getting respect throughout his entire life. This is a Life magazine from 1987, when things were starting to go a bit awry in the royal family. Now here's a pub table set that has been refinished. and they are asking $850 for the refinished version. I honestly like the original finish just fine, but for somebody who wants something that matches American oak better, stripping these old tables will give it a more cohesive look. Here's a nice square walnut table by Lane for the modernist folks who come in here. It's a cute furniture form. This is a sewing table. Mahogany, they say from about 1910, that seems right. You would put your yarn and your big needles in there, and then you're at school space and lots of space for little sewing implements. Little cupboard drawers for more spools. And here's your lip top, so you can use it as a lamp table or a regular piece of furniture when you're not sewing. Pretty cute little piece, and I'd say the price is pretty decent for what it is. Sewing cables seem to sell well. These definitely remind me of Beaux Arts era decorating from about 1910. They're very heavy chalkware. I think they've been refelted. The felt looks newer than the piece. I would say that these were likely to have been made in Europe, but they don't give us any real clues about them. $75 for the pair seems like a good price, though, if you like the color, and that's a lot of color you could work with. Nice circa 1910 quarter-sawed oak bench as well there with the lift top. This is great size for in the hallway. You can put your gloves and your scarves and the things you only use in the winter there, and then sit on it and put your shoes on or take them off when you're coming in and out. Especially in northern climates, we find these useful to have near a door. Notice the difference in ash. So here's oak, quarter sawn, and then here's the grain in ash. Definitely a different look. Ash was used in a lot of furniture as secondary woods, but back around 1900, and previous to that, you saw it as primary wood as well. They have this listed as a dry sink, but I would actually call it a commode. A dry sink usually has a well, but this has a nice towel bar. It has the place for the thunderbox, of course, and it is priced at $165, which is a pretty good price for that. Copper-clad shoes, everybody's baby shoes. This is very popular to do in the mid-20th century. This is pretty neat for $45 for a kitchen fizz. It's got great color. It is old. Fried oyster recipe for Snyder's ketchup from about 1920. Character glasses. Again, you're going to see a lot of things that are familiar to people who would just chance in here. This is an interesting World War II poster telling us to buy war stamps and bonds and reflecting back to the Revolution. We are in Washington. There is a stealth bomber. This was probably somebody who worked at the plant who got this in the 1980s when these came out. You see the mauve matting from the era. Well, I'm having so much fun being back here. It's just been way too long, and I can't wait to take you on other adventures too. So if you haven't subscribed, do, because that way you can click the bell to be notified of future videos, and you won't miss any of our adventures anywhere that we go around the wonderful world of antiques and vintage. Cool 50s lamp. It needs a good fiberglass shade, but this one at least is the right shape for the era. And they have that one priced at $125. Next to it is this apothecary jar, only $35 with the interesting treatment from the 1960s. You saw these in a lot of bathrooms and boudoirs at that time full of cotton balls. And then this lamp here does have its proper shade, and I really like that architectural look to it. This is going to be from the 1950s. We're near the cruise ship line, so you'll see people walking through with luggage waiting for their ship to leave to Alaska, right down the block from here. TV tray sets are pretty useful, and this one has nice painting on it. The flowers is from the 1950s, $75 for the set. I remember buying these years ago because I thought they were useful, and people were like, oh, nobody does that anymore. Well, now life has changed, and we do. A lot of people never eat at the dining table anymore, so these are useful again. Oh yes, I remember my grandmother making something very similar to this out of her friend's broken costume jewelry. The larger and more elaborate ones can be money, and I do look at them because once in a while I find, in one case I found a $200 Juliana pin, which I ripped off the thing and had a new back put on and sold for way more than I paid for the piece. And then I replaced that pin with another broken vintage pin and sold the frame as well. There's our 2-dot Pepsi Cola sign from the early 1950s. And then we have vintage fashion and some pieces that look like they are pretty fun. There's a pattern for you. This one's cute, out of the 1960s. And I don't know what it is, but I always like these ones that look lacy. And a bunch of flannels, because it is the Northwest, and on a cool day like this, well, a flannel shirt can be something of use. Old piano rolls. Not many people have player pianos anymore. They're $3 each because of that. Ah, Zeno would like this. Look, it's a Kirby for $50. And a Eureka Imperial from the, I'd say, 1980s with that color scheme, sitting on a big national novelty scale. Your weight, your health, what do you weigh? Here is your player piano. So this is what you would use with those rolls. This was from a Nickelodeon. This is a Chicago Nickelodeon piano. And it's got a great stained glass insert. And this should date to sometime right around 1910. There is where you would put your nickels to hear it play. Priced at $2,600. They are worth this much. It's just that not so many people are able to transport and deal with the big piano now. So the demand isn't as high as they were, but for the people who want them, this is a fair price. And there's the old sign. Since 1978, they've been crating and shipping stuff all over the country from here. More cool vintage fashion sitting up there. More furniture that would have been contemporary at the time that this place opened, along with a really cool 50s lamp. Now there's a proper fiberglass shade, and that one is priced at $225 because, boy, just the shades have gotten to be really hard to find now. And then down here we have a very nice table. This looks like one of the California design tile tables from the 1920s and 30s because it's a little more ornate pattern. I wonder what his price on this is. I do like these and I do sell them well. And I haven't had one for a while. $225. Well, he does say it is California, so I was correct about that. I believe Taylor was one of the companies that made them there. But $225 is about what I would ask for it too. Yes, Kitsapper. This is where I grew up. And we moved there in 1976 when this was issued, and Glenn Jarstad was the mayor, the chief of the Kitsapper tribe and mayor of Bremerton. They were having some fun with this. $45 on that local interest piece. There is a gigantic console stereo. This may be what we're listening to, actually. And behind it, a really fun walk-up bar. I like the green color with the black. This is pickled oak from the late 1950s, where they would do this dark finish. And I like the contrast personally. Mid-Michigan Wrestling Conference champions. Well, apparently so. This wrestler must have been really good because look at all those medals from 1980. Interestingly enough, this Letterman's jacket may have been made here in Washington. Let's see if we could tell. Oh no, this was a J.C. Penney's. Interesting. I did not know that they did Letterman's jackets back then. I like rolling carts, and this one with the wheats is a little more interesting because of the printed surface. This could be from about 1960. $75 is a pretty good deal on that. You could use it in a kitchen for more space or use it to put your bar collection. Nice slag glass lamp from about 1910, priced at $500. The L.E. Smith horse bookends. I'm used to seeing those in clear. You don't see colors as often. And here's something right out of the 80s with a new shade, but that calla lily lamp. I have the table lamp that matches this in Florida that I need to get a small repair done on and put out for sale. This one is priced at $400. There's a couple of needle Victrolas and standing floor record players from the early 1900s. And then there's this smoking stand. This is one of the most elaborate I've ever seen. It has the lighter, it has all of the accessories. It also has a clock built in and a big lamp. That's kind of unusual. Ma and Pa Kettle in Waikiki. Ma and Pa Kettle were based on The Egg and I, which was a book set right across the water from here, and based on the real experience of a woman whose husband dragged her out in the 1930s to live on a farm. It was a lot like Green Acres. More Coors Rosebud. He has quite a big collection of this in stock right now. This is a Napanee Dutch kitchenette, a form of kitchen queen. And it's got replaced, but beautifully replaced, stained glass windows on the top. At least I think those are replacement. Yeah, somebody put those in at a later time. You can see a little bit of the finish work on them, but they look just great. These were made in Napanee, Indiana, so they are not a Hoosier. Hoosier was its own company, but they are definitely of that type. These jugs were decorated with decoupage in the 1960s and 70s, as was popular to do at the time, and they're priced at about $40 or $45 each. Caster sets that have color are definitely more collectible than the ones that are clear, all other things being equal. Caster was a certain type of a sauce and would have gone in one of those bottles along with your other condiment. A nice European juicer that I'm sure still works, and is priced at $45. That seems like a pretty good price for that. Now, this kitchen queen has the original slag glass panels. Those are original to the piece. And there's a bunch of other kitchen down this aisle here, including this really fun set of apple canisters by Descoware from the 1950s. This is Franciscanel Patio. I'm going to take it out so you can see it. I just sold the purple version of this relish at Lander Street Vintage. They usually only say made in USA, so you have to know this is part of the Franciscan line. So this is a sleeper piece that we'll see at the States cheaply because people don't know what it is, but it dates back to the 30s. $18 for the lightning chopper for your ice to make cocktails in the early post-Prohibition era. That's a pretty good price on that. Here's some patriotic salt and pepper shakers from the Second World War. If you like silhouettes, well, both Hall China and Crooksville made a silhouette pattern in China in the 1930s or 40s in kitchenware. This one is the Bacon by Crooksville. Interesting history of gollywogs in a small collection here. Gollywogs were considered very cute when they came out and are based on the Adventures of Two Dutch Dolls by Florence K. Upton, who wrote that book in 1895. And it was a caricature of blackface minstrel performers. It was actually not originally intended to be based on black people, but on people who were imitating black people. Because of that, the worldview has changed. And so by the 1960s, they were understood to be racially insensitive. And so you don't see them as much, but they are collectible. A nice podium here from the 1920s or 30s for your club meetings, priced at $350. This could definitely be useful if you're in a position where you're speaking a lot and have a hall to do that. Curved glass china cabinet. This one, again, he really does look for things that have a little bit more design to them. So this one has these bars on the outside of the curved glass, which makes it a little more interesting. A little lobby personal waist scale. I always like scales, and this one wouldn't be so horrible to have to move around. And this tells you how much you should weigh depending how tall you are. Fortunately, my area is obscured. Interesting English gesso fireplace screen with a little bit of brass trim. No, actually, the whole thing is brass. It's molded brass. This is typically what we see piano stools looking like without a back. Lots of postcards, lots of pictures of local interest attractions, and a big Texaco sign. The Jack Frost refrigerator. This is an old ice box back when the Iceman came, and you would put your ice in the bottom where it would drain, and that would keep everything cold inside. This is what most people had, and this was a big improvement over what was there before, which was nothing. Pretty soon, refrigeration that we think of today became a big thing in the 1920s, and these became obsolete. But they're great for cabinets, and $450 is about the right price on that one. Only $65 on the little kid's bicycle there from the 1950s, a shiny red bike. The Coca-Cola bow tie logo is one of their more distinct ones and more collectible. This is from an old Grange Hall. The Grange Hall in our neighborhood when I was a kid was where you went to play baseball, and so I suspect that that's why this existed. They probably had a similar setup there. I just sold my Greyhound ashtray at Lander Street Vintage here in Seattle. This one's priced at $150. I think that's similar to the price I got the line. Nice pond boat there. I know we have some viewers who like pond boats as much as I do. I'm a big fan. If I had a big pond, I'd probably collect those. This is an interesting European drop front desk. This would be the way to open the desk to get into it. I like this Art Nouveau metal attachment. Ooh, strobe light. I always think of the B-52 song from the early 80s when I see these. $25. This is definitely what they looked like back in that time. Realistic xenon strobe. I might have to get that for that price. All the way back to 1985. Seafair is an annual event that has been going on in Seattle for many decades now, and this was from the Windjammer restaurant. They were putting up Miss Donna Latin to be Seafair Queen one year. I'd say this is 1970s, but of course they were trying to cast it as much older than that at the time. Drawers and things with drawers in them are very popular these days for collectors. The top one is from Asia. You can tell by the shapes of the handles and the way that they're made that that's all handmade. And then below is a commercially made one from the US from 1920. And look at that, an actual phone booth. We don't see many of these anymore. This would have been indoors, of course, because it's wood and it had to have ventilation because you might be sitting there for a while. Looks like a few people did. Look at that great old phone in it with the receiver that you pick up. Hello. By the way, we went to a really cool phone museum, and if you watch the Antique Nomad Shorts channel, you can see a great little video about that I did with a friend of mine over in Cleveland, Washington. He's actually quite fascinating, worth a 6-minute view. Ken caught on to buying office furniture way before a lot of the rest of us did, and so he's got a lot of these old 1920s file cabinets, and the prices are pretty good, only about $250 each on a lot of these. He's got bunnykin figures, so he does have some small collectibles as well, but he's also got a whole wall of neon, and neon has become expensive, and because of that, I'm not really making neon signs anymore. And so antique and vintage stores are the places to get this sort of thing. The least expensive one is the Corona Extra, but it looks like the top of that one needs a little bit of work. At scales and scientific instruments, $200 on the big vintage gold scale is not a bad deal. I bought one similar to it when I was selling at Pike Place back at the old antique mall that used to be there. It came out of a butcher store in the market. And it sold, and it was so heavy, I was so glad I didn't have to take it far. Olympia beer, now defunct, but that's a very typical Northwest scene. It's very pretty here. You see these with various logos. Polynesian Village was an attraction at the Disney parks, $20 each on those. An old map of the colonial grants. This shows you the original colonies and how they were divided and how big they used to be. The westward extension was literally, they just drew lines and said, okay, Virginia, you get all of this. Carolina, North Carolina, and South Carolina are going to be one thing, and they get all of this. Well, then South Carolina got cut off, and then Tennessee got cut off, and then Kentucky got cut off, and, well, now those are all other states, all arguing with each other. We're close enough to Canada that you will see Blue Mountain pottery. I always thought this was a really graceful design. It's a 1970s glaze, but they came out with this in the early 50s, about the same time that Winslow Anderson, the former Blanco designer, went to Lenox and designed a similar piece that won all sorts of awards. An old scrapbook with various Christmas and other cards, including some advertising pieces, and then a whole bunch of trains down here, a bunch of American Flyer. from the 1950s and 60s. Everything from track to a few cars and some track accessories, and then a Marx train set there, old cap guns. So there's a lot of fun different things here. And toys. Again, anything that seems like the sort of thing that people would be familiar with who are not necessarily antique collectors, you're going to see in a place like this because there's such a heavy tourist factor here. And so they want to hit a lot of people and get them started on collecting. And this is a great way to do it with fire extinguishers and radios and toys. I like the hook and ladder car in the middle there. The Tonka car carrier with the two Ford Rancheros from the 1950s is a harder piece to find. And just full of fun things for people to go through. Everything from patches to lobby cards to photos of Shirley Temple. And of course, Seattle Road Spare, because of a lot of this sells to people who come here as tourists today, just like it did back when the Road Spare was on. Little juice glasses, the original ones that were sold at Mobile, the guidebook. There's something from Expo 74 in Spokane. A World Star scrapbook. Who else that would be fun to look at. And these cleats were by Frederick and Nelson, which was the fancy department store in town. Those are $35 each. Should be fun to use those on the table every day. I like the twin torsion balance scales. $150 is about the right price on those. This is really cool because it's an all Bakelite radio, and those are hard to find. $850 is a reasonable price because of the material. And then this with the model plastic by Emerson is a model I haven't seen before. There's also some good transistors in here. And a bunch of old Seattle baseball related items from the old Seattle Rainiers and the Seattle Pilots, our first attempt at the Major League team here. And flighters. We are in the land of airplanes. Boeing is a huge company here still, and a lot of people who work for them assembled models as a hobby. You see a lot of those flying up in the rafters here. The knot examples on the board priced at $50 is a good decorative object. They typically sell for about that. Look at this cool U.S. Navy diving helmet, a Mark V, priced at $1,000. These are expensive. They're so decorative. And for the collector who loves maritime stuff, they're worth every penny. Fun painted Japanese umbrella, and I believe that the success of this place over a 45-year period pretty much disproves the notion that an open umbrella is bad luck. Well, it's just such a pleasure to get to show you this place. It is a really, really cool Seattle institution, and I don't know why it took me so long to get in here to show you that if you get to Seattle, it is right in the heart of the tourist district at the bottom of the Pike Place hill climb, right across from the Seattle Aquarium, and stop in and see all the cool stuff. You'll have fun, and come along with me next time on another fun adventure in the world of antiques and vintage.
If you enjoyed this video, check out this one. Also, click thumbs up to like this video and check the description for information about our Patreon, our memberships. We've got a lot of different levels with different perks and bonus videos and early content. Also, please do check out our website, theantiquenomad.com, for appraisal help. And we'll see you again for more adventures in the antique and vintage community soon. Bye for now.